Time to go on campus with Gary Danielson.
3 tight ends in the formation, I formation with Holyfield and Michelle. We fake it and the sweep and throw it into the end zone to the tight end, Isaac Nauta. Touchdown under the goalpost. Nauta pumping his fist to the Georgia fans behind the end zone. Touchdown, Bulldogs.
From Alabama to Oklahoma to UCLA, Gary and Doggy have college football covered from coast to coast.
Hand it off, give it to Feaster. He breaks a tackle to 5. It goes into the end zone. Touchdown, Clemson.
If you want college football talk, there is no better place to be than Mondays with Doggy and Gary D.
Baker, play action, straight drop. Looking deep, throws it deep down the right sideline. Looking for Hollywood. He's got him on the run. 10-5. It's a touchdown. Oh, mama! Baker Mayfield to Marquise Brown, 52 yards.
Now let's break it all down with Mad Dog and Gary Danielson.
It's great to have Gary D with us for a holiday week. We got a lot of games to get to. Gary, nice to chat. How are you, buddy? Okay?
I'm great. We're still kind of savoring our last game. That Army-Navy game was so much fun this year. It really is one of the great things I get to do.
Oh, you loved it. I watched it. It was a fun game with the weather and everything else. I can tell that you enjoyed it. You obviously had the Sun Bowl. We also have
just to give you how weird that game was, Navy received the second half kickoff. How many possessions did each team have in the second half?
I'll say 3 apiece.
Navy had 3. Army had 2.
Wow, how about that?
Isn't that something?
Wow.
A 14-play drive, and they missed a field goal. A 13-play drive, and they scored. And then Army had an 11-play drive to miss the field goal at the end. Isn't that incredible?
Well, those 2 penalties killed them. There's no question about it.
2 penalties killed them. That's exactly right.
We got a lot to do. Let's do the first big theme here of some of these games. Do you think there'll be some of these players, a la McCaffrey and Fournette, who are not in a big game that might take the day off not to get hurt?
Well, especially if you're a running back. I think that's the one position because of the lifespan of a running back, the shots that you can take at all different angles. You couldn't blame any kid in that position for thinking about that. We have Chubb from North Carolina State playing in the Sun Bowl. We don't know if he's going to play. He's, an elite defensive lineman. But Solomon Thomas played in that game last year and made himself about an extra $5 million. So you never really know how these games could roll out or what the players are thinking. But I do think, the enigma of not playing in this game as if you're being selfish has been now set aside with McCaffrey and the way he's playing, in the NFL and how valuable he is. And one can understand now that if it's not a big game, if it's not a playoff game, if it's not a Rose Bowl game, one can understand some of these specialists might take this game off.
All right, there are 2 games I'm very interested in. One is Ohio State USC, and the other one is the Auburn game against UCF. I'm expecting Auburn to be into it. Frost is at UCF. This is a fascinating game on New Year's Day in the Peach Bowl. Let me hear your take on that for a sec. Go ahead.
Well, I think Auburn's going to be ready for this game. I think, of all the coaching moves that was done, you can argue, who did the most for their school. And, there's tons of them to pick. Scott Frost in Nebraska is a huge hire. I mean, Chip Kelly going to UCLA. Dan Mullen, that there was a, wonder of what would happen at Florida. But one might argue that Gus Malzahn staying at Auburn, especially at the end of this run, had he jumped to Arkansas and Auburn was, caught at the end of this coaching surf to try to find somebody to keep Auburn at its level. I think Auburn's going to be ready for this game, especially with the way Central Florida's popped off. That
good point.
We've got the speed in this game. So, I would be surprised if Auburn is not ready to play in this football game, especially, the way they won those 2 big games. And, we talked about this. They were in that SEC championship game until the fumble by Kerryon Johnson, an injured Kerryon Johnson. That was a 6-point game. So I like Auburn in this game, but I have a lot of respect for Central Florida's athletes and the way they play football there.
All right, Ohio State, USC. A very difficult game to call. USC is usually good in bowls. Ohio State should not be an 8-point favorite when you consider USC, I think, has got the much better quarterback. Ohio State wasn't that impressive against Wisconsin. That game is in the Cotton Bowl on the next Friday at night. What's your take about this game for a sec?
Well, I thought Ohio State, that game would have looked a lot different if J.T. Barrett would have just hit 3 players who were open for touchdowns. And I think the way we looked at that game, we may look at Ohio State a lot different, and perhaps Ohio State could be in the playoffs if not for, and we've all been there. We miss them. Aaron Rodgers missed them in that game we just saw. But I do give Urban a lot of respect for sticking with J.T. He's been very loyal to him. He's been the face of that program, and he wouldn't say a bad word about J.T. Barrett if he was on a stretcher. Okay, so I think that says a lot to the rest of the players on that team, and I think Ohio State will be ready to play the game. But I just got done watching a tape. I wanted to go back and watch USC play against Arizona State, who was having a pretty good season. They had just knocked off, I think, in back-to-back weeks, Washington and Utah. And, Todd Graham is playing for, his coaching career over there at Arizona State.
Right.
And Sam Darnold put on a show against a pretty good defense. Defensive coordinator Phil Bennett, who was ready for him, he made incredible throws, off balance, going sideways. He looked like he looked in that game like he was an Aaron Rodgers type arm throwing the ball in space. He put on. I got to say, if you put on that tape, you have to say, okay, is he going first, second, or third in the draft? If you just watch that tape,
right? So you think he'll play a big game and Ohio State could be in trouble?
I do. I like his talent. Now he does turn the ball over. And this is not the most physical USC team I've ever seen. They're not as talented on the offensive and the defensive line as I've seen. But when this guy gets it going, man, oh man. So I think it is. I think you did pick out one of the, if you're not talking the playoffs, I think probably the most exciting football game out there is.
Yeah, those two. I like those two. Okay, now the playoff games. Which one, from a expert standpoint, which you are, intrigues you more?
Well, it's hard not to want to watch the third game of Clemson, Alabama. Listen, they don't have Deshaun Watson playing at quarterback, and everybody said, after all the talent that Clemson's lost in the last 2 drafts, plus Watson, could Clemson really line up and do this again to this Alabama team? Now, I've said this to you all year. This is a very consistent Alabama football team, but it is not one of Nick Saban's 5 best teams. They have a few holes on this team, but this is a team, everything I've read, and I follow them every day in the paper, usually, you get an Alabama team that kind of does not say much, but they have been very verbal that they cannot wait to play this football game.
Yeah, I think
they've had another Nick at linebacker again. You can want all you want sometimes if you're not as talented, and they're not. They're good, but they're not as elite as they were. I really can't wait to watch both football games. But I think without Deshaun Watson this year, I think Alabama might be ready to take this football game.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I do think the other kid is decent, but he's not Watson. And Clemson had to go to the very end just to get a split with Watson, and this kid's not Watson. And the other thing, too, Gary, I think it's a factor you might maybe that's got something to do with them talking a lot. Alabama, they got lucky to get into this tournament. We all know they were fortunate. Yeah, there's some people out there, they're wrong, but there are some people out there that felt that Ohio State should have been in this Final Four. And I'll tell you right now, if I was in Alabama, that's a weird spot for them to be in with a little chip on their shoulder. It's usually on the other side that they got to deal with. Now Alabama's got that little thing. Had a bad loss. They want to get that bad taste out of their mouth. Because of those reasons, I think Alabama's going to win. I'm with you 100%.
Well, I tell you, they better stop Hunter Renfrow, the slot receiver, who in the last 2 years have caught 17 passes for over 170 yards and 4 touchdowns. And he's a lot better football player than people realize. And that is a slot position that, has Clemson has taken advantage of the last 2 years. They still have a strong offensive line. It will be a good football game. I also think that Alabama will be comfortable playing in that in the Sugar Bowl. They played there a lot. And you are right. They don't often get to play in games with a chip on their shoulder. Remember in 2010, they got beat up a couple times, and they played Michigan State and just slapped them in a bowl game. And then in 2011, they came back and avenged that 9-6 loss to LSU in the championship game. So it is a little different feeling for Alabama, not going in being the hunted, more being the hunter.
Yeah, I like him in the game, and I think the odds makers do too. They're a 3-point favorite. But for those reasons that you just said, plus I don't think the Clemson quarterback's as good, I do think Alabama will win. And I think the first game is a very hard game to figure out. I don't know if I completely trust the Georgia quarterback. I do trust Mayfield, but I hate the Oklahoma defense. So this is a very hard game to figure in the Rose Bowl. Plus Heisman Trophy quarterbacks sometimes don't play well in these bowl games. Hard game to read. Give me a little feel on the Oklahoma game with Georgia. Go ahead.
This whole game is about one thing: can Georgia run the ball? Can Georgia keep the ball away from Baker Mayfield?
Well, I would think they could. They got 3 great running backs. I would think they could, right?
Well, but it comes down to their offensive line, who sometimes shows up. They were ready against Auburn, and they looked like they dominated that game against Auburn in the SEC championship. But then you look up, it's 13-7. Okay, now they're going to face athletes like that who've been hearing for a month that the weakest link on the field is the defensive front for Oklahoma. I'm always suspicious of teams who are told by all the experts that they're the soft team. I'm always suspicious of that coming to be true. I always feel like if there's any group on the field that wants to prove their manhood, it's the Oklahoma front seven on defense, right? I mean, they got to be tired of hearing that the big bad SEC guys are going to come in and show them how physical football's played. And that really is the game to me, because you're right. I mean, it's too much to ask the true freshman quarterback who played brilliantly. And it's almost not even fair to say true freshman quarterback anymore. I mean, he has played a whole season and played in big games at Auburn, SEC championship game. I mean, he has got to be ready for this game, and he's not a rookie anymore. Let's put it that way. But I don't think he's the type of guy that's going to throw the ball 35 times. They want to keep him in that formula that has worked for them, 20 to 26 throws, and that means they have to run the ball with Chubb, with Sony Michel, DeAndre Smith. I mean, they've got the Swift, I mean, they've got 3 great running backs, and look at the team and the program that Kirby's building right there with this recruiting class he's putting together. It's exciting time. It's an exciting time for the SEC, but as I told the SEC commissioner and a lot of the dignitaries at the Hall of Fame banquet, this is a great month to pound your chest about the SEC getting in 2 teams. Just don't lose both games.
Yeah, that's a good point. You think you like Mayfield as a quarterback there?
I do, but it really is an interesting year for quarterback because I'm telling you, Josh Rosen, I mean, the way Jared Goff has played this year, okay, I think that makes it great for all of these quarterbacks coming out because, it may be tough for head coaches in the NFL because, what McVay has done it with the Rams has put everybody on notice who's got a young quarterback going, really? If we can find the right guy, we can change this thing around fast. But I think the way that Goff has played means Rosen and Darnold and kid from Wyoming, Allen, and Baker Mayfield. I think you're going to get 4 taken in the first round. I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Who do you like in the Georgia game?
I like Alabama. I'm going to call it a split. I think Baker Mayfield's going to get hot. And Georgia, I really thought they were 1 year away this year. It's been a great run but I'll take Oklahoma versus Alabama.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, it's hard to pick the both SECs. That's an excellent point. I'm more confident in Alabama. Last thing, Gary. I'm more confident in Alabama. For whatever the reason, Watson not there and a little chip on their shoulder. I think Nick's going to be all revved up. I think, and plus they get an extra week off too. They didn't have to play a game here in the championship game. I think Alabama is going to be a pain in the ass in these 2 games. You know that?
Well, and how do they play? I mean, do they ride that Bo Scarborough running back train again? Damian Harris, remember they started out the second half running him, and he looked like all world. Boy, I'm really anxious to watch the game. I have to say, I love NFL football. I love what I do, but this game on the New Year's Day, these 2 games, I'll be on the couch.
You deserve it. You deserve it. Have a happy holidays. We will talk to you before the championship game that week. Okay, pal?
You got it. Thanks, pal.
Take care, Gary D. Good thought. We'll get to Michael Weissman next. Ian Emberg. Stick with us here on Mad Dog Unleashed.